Have you ever wondered who really wrote the Bible? Not the authors who signed their books, but who decided which text would go there and which would be silenced forever. And if I told you that, in the heart of that decision, I was not an apostle, not a prophet, but a Roman emperor. A man who never lived as a Christian, but shaped Christianity with iron hands, between swords, political alliances, and pagan temples. His name is Constantine the Great, and the story that involves its relationship with the Christian faith is not sacred. It is strategic. The faith that was born in the catacombs was taken to the throne. The cross, a symbol of execution, was transformed into an imperial flag. And the Bible, which should be the pure record of divine revelation, went through the hands of an emperor who saw in religion a tool for control and unification. What has been decided in Constantine-sponsored councils still echoes in each church, in each preaching, on each page of the scriptures you read today. But what was left out? What voices were erased from the story so that only one version of the truth would remain? Get ready to find out how the Bible we know has been shaped not only by divine inspiration, but also for earthly interests. And maybe, just maybe, you find out that modern Christianity is a much more political construction than they told you. But don't worry, this is not an attack on faith. It is an invitation to awaken, because true faith does not fear difficult questions. She welcomes them. What happens when a collapsed empire decides to take control of a faith that grows on the fringes of power? The name of this is Constantine the Great. But what many don't know is that he was never baptized while ruled. He was never a confirmed Christian in the traditional sense. And yet, it became one of the greatest molders of the modern Christian faith. Why would a pagan emperor, son of a sun cult, be interested in a persecuted and fragmented religion? To understand this, we need to go back to the year of 312 after Christ. On the banks of the Tiber River, on the famous Battle of the Milvia Bridge, Constantine faced his rival Massincio for the total control of the West Roman Empire. According to the legend, recorded by Eusebio de Caesarea, one of his main supporters, Constantine would have had a vision before the battle. He saw a cross in heaven with the sayings, "In hoc sign vinces," that is, with this signal you will win. But there is something curious. It was not a traditional Christian cross, but a symbol named Chi-Rho, formed by the Greek letters Chi and Rho, Rho, the first two letters of the name Christos. This symbol was already used by solar cults of the time, especially the cult of Mitre. The adoption of this symbol raises an uncomfortable question. Was Constantine adhering to Christianity or reinterpreting it in his own way? After all, in Roman coins coined after the battle, Constantine still appears next to the sun Invictus, god of the pagan sun. The truth little commented is that he promoted a fusion between Christianity and imperial paganism, creating a new state religion shaped to control, not just to evangelize. The key point that almost no one argues: Constantine never participated in the Eucharist while ruled. He was baptized only on the deathbed in 337 after Christ by Eusebius of Nicomedia, a sympathetic bishop to Arianism, the heresy that the Council of Nicea itself fought. That is, the emperor who defined orthodoxy died being baptized by a declared heretic. But why does that matter so much? Because the man who most influenced the formation of institutional Christianity never fully lived the faith that imposed on the world. This is not conspiracy theory. It is documented history, and the story goes on. What was more shaped by him, and why? If you think the Bible was formed in prayer and communion between saints, it may be time to review this image. The first major official meeting that shaped the foundations of Christianity, as we know, it was the Council of Nicea, convened by Constantine in the year of 325 after Christ. But what few people realize is that this council was not summoned by religious leaders, but by a Roman emperor, a politician, a general, a master of diplomacy. Nicea was not a traditional religious event. It was a political conference transvestite of a spiritual council. About 300 bishops from various regions of the empire were gathered there, all pressured by the urgency of solving a problem that threatened the stability of Rome. The doctrinal division over who Jesus Christ was. Was he God? Was it just a prophet? Was it a special creature, but inferior to God the Father? The answer to this question was not just theological ... It was strategic. The main doctrinal enemy at the time was Arius, a priest of Alexandria, who taught that Jesus was the Son of God, but created by him, therefore, not eternal and not the same as the Father. This put the Trinity, which was not even a consolidated concept yet. For Constantine, this dispute was not a matter of faith. It was a threat to the empire. Theological divisions could cause political clashes, revolts, and weakening of central power. The empire would not survive a war of interpretations. It was in this context that the first official version of Christian orthodoxy emerged. In the council, the doctrine of consubstantiality was imposed. Jesus was of the same substance as the Father, eternal and divine, equal in essence. The writings that supported this view were valued. Those who suggested different interpretations, such as some Gnostic Gospels, were discredited and, in many cases, condemned to oblivion. Another little explored point. It was not discussed at the Council of Nicea which books would be part of the Bible. This would only happen almost 70 years later, with the regional councils of Hippona, 393 after Christ, and Carthage, 397 after Christ. But Nicaea prepared the ground. The decision to standardize the faith also implied standardizing the texts. What was divergent became heresy. Which was useful to the empire was preserved. Constantine, even without being baptized, presided over the council with imperial pomp. She sat on a high throne as the bishops argued. He presented himself as Isopostolos, that is, just like the apostles, a symbolic title that shows the size of the influence he assumed on the fate of faith. And what about the famous letter from Eusebio de Caesarea, which mentions the order of 50 correct Bibles to the new imperial church? Few remember this, but it was the beginning of a silent process of exclusion. Gospels such as Thomas, by Mary Magdalene, Peter's Revelation, all widely used by Christian communities hitherto, have been silenced. Not by doctrinal error, but by political inconvenience. And here begins the formation of the Bible, not as a revelation only, but as a strategic construction. The left question is, what was left out, and who decided that? Today, the cross is a symbol of faith, salvation, and unconditional love. But have you ever stopped to think that for the early Christians, she represented something totally different? The cross was an instrument of torture, public humiliation, and violent death used by the Romans to eliminate rebels and criminals. Jesus died on a cross, and that, for the early followers, was a trauma, not a trophy. Interestingly, the Christians of the first 3 centuries did not use crosses as a symbol. The first archaeological records show fish, anchors, doves, the Good Shepherd carrying a sheep on the shoulders, life images, haute execution. The cross only gained prominence after Constantine's intervention. The story that Eusebio de Caesarea tells, and is often repeated without reflection, is that Constantine had a vision before the Battle of the Bridge, Milvia, a cross of light in the sky, accompanied by the phrase, "In hoc sign vinces," with this signal you will win. Inspired by this, he would have ordered to paint the Chi-O symbol in the shields of the soldiers. But here there is a little-known distortion. Chi-R was not an exclusive symbol of Christianity. It was already used by pagan cults, especially in the cult of Mitre and the Sun Invictus, both very popular among the Roman military. That is, the symbol of Constantine's victory was more solar than Christian. The most revealing. Even after this supposed conversion, imperial currencies continued to be coined by the image of the Sun Invictus, the sun god, for almost 2 decades. Constantine's official title continued to be Pontifex Maximus, the highest priest of the traditional Roman religion. So what really happened? Constantine did not abandon paganism. He incorporated him into Christianity, creating a new symbolic language that could please everyone: pagan soldiers, Roman aristocrats, and Christian converts. The cross in this new context is no longer ashamed and became glory. No more the victim's symbol, but a victory. And with that, the crucified Christ has come to be represented no longer like the suffering servant, but as the glorious king, enthroned, often with imperial traits. The power of the image was essential. Constantine built monumental churches with marble columns and golden domes. Cruces crossed in their banners, flags, and constructions, not as symbols of humility, but as seals of conquest. The Christianity that grew in the catacombs gained palaces, and with them, he lost part of their simplicity, their diversity, and their silent rebellion. Now, think to me, if the central symbol of the Christian faith was shaped from political conveniences, how many other elements of what we call sacred may have been edited equally? When we speak of Bible, we think of a closed, unchanging, sacred set. But the truth is that for more than 3 centuries, Christianity did not have a single official book. There were dozens of texts being read, copied, and taught in the most diverse communities: Gospels, letters, Revelation. And the most shocking? Some of these texts were even older than those who are now part of the New Testament. What happened to these books? They were discarded, forgotten, prohibited, and in some cases persecuted with violence. One of the most emblematic examples is the Gospel of Thomas, a collection of 114 phrases attributed to Jesus. No miracles, no crucifixion, only deep teachings about self-knowledge and the search for inner light. For the Gnostics, it was the purest text, but for the imperial church, it was too dangerous. Why? Because he claimed that the kingdom of God is within you. This eliminated the need for temples, hierarchies, rituals. Such a teaching could undermine the whole structure of ecclesiastical power that was formed with the support of the empire. Another example, the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, where she appears as the closest disciple of Jesus, receiving secret teachings and causing the envy of Peter. This text directly questioned the male monopoly of the clergy. In a religion that would soon have alleged the Roman patriarchy, a woman in the center of divine revelation was unthinkable. We also have Peter's Apocalypse, which describes in detail the fate of souls after death, even revealing that even the convicts could receive mercy from God. This text suggested that divine grace was greater than human institutions. And that was a problem, because the nascent church needed to say that outside it there was no salvation. But perhaps the most emblematic case is that of the Gospel of Judas, where the traitor is actually the most faithful of the disciples. He who, obeying a divine plan, gives Jesus to fulfill his mission. Such a gospel totally reverses the traditional narrative, placing in check central concepts such as guilt, sacrifice, and redemption. The question that echoes is simple and uncomfortable. If these texts circulated freely among early Christians, why were they erased from official history? And the answer is even more disturbing, because they gave power to the individual, not the institution. Because they spoke of inner light, direct revelation, spiritual equality, ideas incompatible with an imperial Christianity that needed order, control, and submission. The selection of the Gospels was not only made by spiritual criteria, but by political needs, and what was left out still echoes like a muffled voice asking to be heard. But is it still possible to rescue this voice? At the end of his life, Constantine was more than an emperor. He was the very image of a crowned apostle, not for divine vocation, but by personal decree. It was he who determined Sunday as the sacred day, replacing the Jewish Saturday in honor of the Sol Invictus, the solar god with which he never totally broke. It was he who prohibited non-Christian cults, but maintained pagan practices within a new liturgy. He was the one who built monumental basilicas on holy tombs in alleged places, such as the Church of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem and that of St. Peter in Rome, creating the first great state-sponsored Christian temples. And it was he who founded Constantinople, the new capital of the empire. As a Christianized Rome, but full of reused pagan statues, a metropolis where the empire and religion became one flesh. What was happening was not the elevation of faith, but the fusion between spirituality and state structure. Religion, once persecuted and marginal, was now used as a tool for unity and control. Salvation became official doctrine. Heresy became a crime, and faith became laws, dogmas, and cathedrals. It is in this scenario that the modern concept of orthodoxy is born. The word literally means correct doctrine. But who decides what is right when the throne and altar are under the same command? It was from this moment that Christianity was no longer a spiritual path and became a system, an empire within the empire. And when faith becomes part of the system, it serves stability, not transcendence. It organizes itself around hierarchies, rules, rituals, and conveniences, and gradually leaves the free fire of individual revelation. Constantine died in 337 AD, baptized at the last moment by a heretic bishop. But the Christianity he consolidated lives to this day, in many forms, still carrying the DNA of his imperial choices. The cross became a universal symbol. The Bible became a closed canon. The church became an institution, but the soul of the original gospel, ... Where is it? This is the question that remains alive. Perhaps Constantine did not invent Christianity, but it is undeniable that he edited him. What you carry today as truth can be an inheritance of powerful men, not just inspired prophets. But that doesn't have to be a reason for loss of faith. On the contrary, it is a call to depth. The truth is not only in the preserved words, but also on the silences that history has imposed. And if you got here, it's because something inside you still seeks. So keep seeking in the forgotten books, in the inverted symbols, and above all, within you.